What's going on, guys? This is Jake Boley with BarBend.com, and today we're going to be talking about 1.5 reps. Now, you may have seen this done in practice. It's when a lifter completes one full rep, then they do a half rep, and then they complete another rep, and that 1.5 reps then counts for one rep. But you might not have understood why they might be doing that. So in this video, we're going to talk about what 1.5 reps are, how to kind of think about them, their benefits, and then how to program them for your goals. So now let's dive in. What the heck are 1.5 reps? So as the name states, 1.5 reps are when you complete a full rep, then a half rep, and the combination of those two movements then count as one rep. Now you might hear people call them 1.25 reps or 1/2 reps, but generally they are called 1.5 reps. And now they're often regarded to as an advanced training concept, but I don't necessarily agree with that statement, especially when we consider some of the ways we're going to apply them and think about them in this video. So now let's talk about how to kind of think about 1.5 reps and how you can kind of start to apply those to your training. All right, so one of the coolest things that I think comes along with 1.5 reps is that we know that there's going to be a full rep and a full range of motion rep in the set, but that half range of motion or that half rep can kind of be defined how we want to. We can define that from the bottom of the eccentric up halfway, or we can define that from the top of the concentric down halfway and then completing that half rep. So we can really define that second range of motion and critique it to what we want to work on most. So let's use a visual really fast. So let's say in the bench press, the traditional 1.5 rep for the bench is you do a full rep, come up halfway at the bottom, and then complete the rep. But you can also take that half rep from the top, limit yourself halfway, and then complete the rep, so you can really critique that to your goals. So let's say you have trouble off the chest in the bench press, using that half rep off the chest and then completing the full rep can be super beneficial and have carryover to your normal pressing strength. That's why I don't like to limit this concept to only advanced athletes. As long as you have a baseline level of form and general body awareness, I think 1.5 reps can be applied to multiple populations as long as you're accounting for volume, intensity, and your form throughout the full range of the motion and movement. So now let's talk about some of the benefits you can gain with 1.5 reps. All right, so 3 benefits that come along with 1.5 reps. And before we dive into these benefits, I want to state one more time that whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced lifter, to use this concept, you need a baseline level of form and general body awareness. Now the benefits. So the first benefit that comes along with 1.5 reps is increased time under tension. And that means you're prolonging the period of time that you're performing a set. And that's super useful for athletes that may not want to increase their load or add extra sets to their workouts, but they do want to increase the overall amount of time they're performing a certain movement. This is also useful for athletes that want to improve and increase their time performing a certain movement for their sport. So if they play more of an endurance sport and they want to increase how long they're moving weight, it's a good concept for doing so. Now the second benefit that comes along with 1.5 reps is improving your mechanical proficiency in various movements. The 1.5 rep strategy can be useful for teaching you just overall body awareness through varied range of motion. Assuming that you're not having technical breakdown, it can be very useful for just ensuring that you're really drilling down the proper mechanics for executing movements. Now for advanced athletes, as we stated earlier, 1.5 reps can be very useful for breaking through sticking points. So if you have trouble, let's say coming out of the hole in the squat, 1.5 reps can be really useful for really drilling down the mechanics you need to do so and to ensure that you're not having technical breakdown when shifting force into a different direction. So going through the eccentric and then coming out of the hole with that strong concentric contraction. Now the third benefit is it improves your mental fortitude or toughness in the gym. Adding weight to a bar is not the only way to improve your mental toughness, especially when it comes to resistance training. Just increasing the amount of time you have to perform a movement is going to do the same. So when you increase the amount of time you have to perform a movement, I think of it similar to how like you go on a run and you set a pace or you set a distance or a time that you want to hit. Similar to that, you have to complete a certain amount of reps and really drill down that amount of time you have to complete them. You're going to be burning. It's going to increase your mental toughness and improve your confidence when moving certain weights through ranges of motion. So now will it have carryover to your 1RMs? Maybe. Mental toughness comes in multiple different forms, so just building a better bridge of understanding what it feels like to be burning during volume training, but also high intensity training is always good to have. So the third benefit, maybe a little bit more objective, but they can increase your mental toughness with various movements. So now that we've chatted benefits, before we dive into programming, let's quickly talk about breathing in 1.5 reps. It's going to be a little bit different than your normal full rep, and that's just because you are adding in that extra movement. So how do you breathe? There's really not a one size fits all, since every range of motion is going to be slightly different, and for some you might be able to hold your breath the whole time, but for other movements you may have to exhale slightly and then tighten back up. My piece of advice is when trying to figure out your breathing, First, work with lighter intensities before diving into what you're going to be working with the 1.5 reps, but also breathe in a way that keeps you technically proficient. So in the squat, for example, if you're coming out of the hole and you notice you exhale a ton and that chest drops, then that could be a sign that you need to change up your breathing patterns a little bit. So when it comes to 1.5 reps, there's not really a one-size-fits-all on how to breathe, but there is a one-size-fits-all on a guideline for how you should be breathing. All right, so now let's talk about programming for 1.5 reps. Please note that there are a ton of different ways to use these in your program, and hopefully I made that clear throughout this video. So there's more than one way to skin the cat. I'm just gonna give a couple examples for how beginners and advanced or intermediate athletes can use this rep scheme. So beginners, once you have a good understanding of how to move through a various exercise, you can use these for lighter intensities to really drill down form mechanics. I love using these in this squat, for example, and using them almost as an accessory under the main working sets just to really drill down an area that I think a lifter should spend a little bit more time on. Oftentimes, this is coming out of the hole in the squat, so I'll use like 50 to 60% of one's 1 RM, and they do like 5 to 7 reps depending on just the overall strength level of that client. And we'll have them work through a nice slow tempo coming up, focusing on really keeping down that torso and hip mechanic at the bottom of the hole, and then maintaining that form throughout the concentric. Now, intermediate and advanced athletes, one way I love to use 1.5 reps outside of just a pure hypertrophy benefit, so you can use them for any exercise to gain a hypertrophy edge, you can also use them for busting through sticking points. And now this is where the individuality comes into play. So let's say for the bench press, you have trouble coming off the chest. Make that half rep portion off the chest, come up halfway, and then complete your rep. If it's at the top, stop halfway on the way down and then lock out. That's gonna shift more of the focus then onto your tris versus at the bottom where it's a lot of the pec and then shift to a try. So when it comes to physically adding 1.5 reps into your program, when it comes to bursting through sticking points, I like to use this as almost a first accessory as opposed to a main compound. You can use it as a main compound. However, it's a little bit easier to scale when it comes to recovery needs, when it's more of an accessory that needs less intensity on the bar. Plus, when it's the first accessory after a compound, you don't have to shift around any of the equipment you're using, you just have to decrease the load, so it's a little bit easier. Typically, I'll program like 4 to 6 reps with a lighter intensity depending on where that sticking point is present and how fried an athlete is. Please note that if you do add in 1.5 reps to account for a little bit more of an accumulation of fatigue since you are prolonging the amount time of sets you're performing, but those are some ways you can program 1.5 reps for both beginners, intermediate, and advanced athletes. It's really fun to get creative with these, especially when you do have technical proficiency, because really you can alter that half rep range of motion to the goals and needs you have. That wraps up our video on 1.5 reps. This concept is by no means new in the strength training industry. However, I do think it's underutilized at times, especially when it comes to certain populations. As long as you have technical proficiency in certain exercises, I think 1.5 reps are a great way to improve your time under tension, your overall technique, and improve your mental toughness. To read more on this, visit BarBend.com or search BarBend and 1.5 reps.